A volcano doesn't always need to explode to become deadly. No rivers of lava, no red sky, no giant blast shaking the ground. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing a volcano can do is simply fall apart. That is what makes Mount Rainier so unsettling. From a distance, it looks peaceful, beautiful, even. Snow on the summit, glaciers shining in the sun. A mountain people take pictures of from Seattle, Tacoma, and small towns all across western Washington. But underneath that calm view is something far more dangerous. Mount Rainier is not most feared because of lava. Lava is not the main threat here. The real danger is mud. Thick, fast-moving volcanic mud. A lahar. And a lahar does not move like normal floodwater. It moves more like wet concrete, heavy, powerful, almost impossible to stop. It can tear trees out of the ground, carry boulders, crush bridges, and bury entire neighborhoods before people fully understand what is happening. That is the frightening part. What if there is no smoke rising from the summit? What if there is no fire? No eruption? No loud warning that tells people, run now? How do you escape a disaster that looks quiet until it is already moving? Mount Rainier has done this before, and the evidence is still buried under modern cities today. So this story is not really about a volcano waiting to erupt. It is about a beautiful mountain with enough ice, broken rock, and hidden weakness to send a wall of mud racing down into the valleys below. And if that happens again, the question will not be whether people can see the danger. The question will be whether they have enough time to get out of its way. About 5,600 years ago, Mount Rainier did something hard to imagine. Its summit collapsed. Not a small landslide, not a little piece of rock breaking loose. A massive part of the mountain gave way, and billions of cubic meters of rock, clay, ice, and water came rushing down into the valleys below. It did not move like a normal landslide. It turned into a giant volcanic mudflow, a lahar. And once it started moving, it just kept going. It tore through forests. It buried trees. It filled valleys with hundreds of feet of mud and debris. Places that once had rivers, soil, and living forests were suddenly covered by a moving wall of earth. Then, it kept traveling. Mile after mile, the mud pushed forward until it reached the sea, about 70 miles away. And even then, it still was not finished. Part of that flow kept moving underwater, beneath what is now part of the Puget Sound region. That is the part that really makes you stop and think. This was not just a local slide on a mountain slope. This was a disaster large enough to reshape the land all the way from the volcano to the coast. Today, people call it the Osceola mudflow. And the most chilling part is not just that it happened, it is where its remains are now. Modern cities, neighborhoods, roads, and businesses sit on top of that old deposit. Places like Tacoma, Auburn, Kent, Enumclaw, Sumner, and Puyallup are not just near the history of that disaster. They are built on it. People drive to work over it. Families live over it. Kids go to school over it. The ground feels normal because thousands of years have passed. Grass grows on it. Homes stand on it. Streets run across it. But under all of that is the hardened body of one terrible afternoon. That is what makes Mount Rainier different. Its danger is not only in what might happen someday. Its danger is proven by what has already happened before. And the scary part is this. The Osceola mudflow was not the first time Mount Rainier sent mud racing down its valleys. And it will almost certainly not be the last. A lahar is not lava. That is the first thing people need to understand. When most of us hear the word volcano, we picture fire. We picture glowing lava rolling down a mountain. We picture red rivers burning everything in their path. But that is not the main danger at Mount Rainier. The real threat is mud. Not normal mud. Not the kind you step in after a rainy day. A lahar is a violent mix of volcanic rock, clay, water, ice, and debris. Once it starts moving, it can turn into something that acts almost like wet concrete, thick, heavy, fast, and incredibly hard to escape. A regular flood is mostly water. It can be powerful, of course. But a lahar carries weight. It carries broken rock. It carries trees, boulders, cars, pieces of buildings, and anything else it rips loose along the way. That is why it can be so destructive. Lava often moves slow enough that people can see it coming. In many cases, you can walk away from it if you have enough warning. A lahar is different. It can rush down a valley at frightening speed. It follows river channels, low ground, and old paths carved by earlier flows. And when it reaches a town, it does not just flood the streets, it buries them. Homes do not simply get wet. They can disappear under layers of mud and debris. Roads vanish. Bridges can be crushed. Cars can be picked up like toys. Trees can be torn from the ground and carried for miles. That is what makes this kind of disaster so hard to think about. It does not look like the volcano disaster most people imagine. There may be no glowing lava, no dramatic wall of fire, no scene that looks like a movie, just a wall of dirty, heavy, fast-moving earth coming down a valley. And by the time people see it, the most important seconds may already be gone. That is the lesson Mount Rainier keeps teaching. The most dangerous disaster is not always the one you can see from far away. Sometimes, it is the one that looks quiet until it is already moving. Mount Rainier is not just a mountain. It is more like a giant water tank sitting on top of a volcanic system. That sounds strange, but once you look at what is actually up there, it starts to make sense. Mount Rainier has 26 glaciers. That is a huge amount of ice. In fact, it holds more glacier ice than any other volcano in the Cascade Range, and that ice matters. Because for a lahar to form, you need water. Rainier already has that water stored high on the mountain in the form of snow and ice. Then you have volcanic rock. You have steep slopes. You have loose material. And inside parts of the mountain, you also have clay. That clay is a big part of the danger. Rock and water alone can create a landslide or a flood. But when clay gets mixed in, the whole thing changes. Clay helps the flow stay thick. It helps hold water inside the moving debris. That means the mud can keep traveling much farther than a normal slide would. So when people look at Mount Rainier and see a white, peaceful summit, they are only seeing the surface. Under that, snow is a system with all the ingredients already in place. Ice for water, rock for debris, clay to keep the mud moving, gravity to pull it downhill, and heat underneath it all. That is why scientists take this mountain so seriously. It does not need to build a disaster from nothing. The pieces are already there. They are stacked on the slopes, frozen into the glaciers, hidden inside the cone, and waiting for the wrong trigger at the wrong time. That is what makes Rainier so unsettling. It looks calm. But it is holding enough water, rock, and unstable material to turn a quiet valley into a disaster path. From far away, Mount Rainier looks solid. It looks like one huge block of rock covered in snow and ice. Strong, quiet, permanent. But that is not the full truth. Deep inside the mountain, something has been happening for a very long time. Hot, sulfur-rich gases rise from the volcanic system below. As those gases move upward through the mountain, they meet groundwater trapped inside the rock. And when that happens, a chemical reaction begins. The gases and water help create sulfuric acid. That acid slowly attacks the volcanic rock from the inside. It breaks it down. It changes it. Over time, hard rock becomes soft clay. Scientists call this hydrothermal alteration. But in plain English, the mountain is rotting from within. That is a hard thing to picture, because Rainier does not look weak. On a clear day, it looks massive and steady. People see the white summit from Seattle and Tacoma and think of beauty, not danger. But under the snow, parts of the mountain are not as strong as they appear. Some of that rock has been chemically changed into clay, and clay behaves very differently from solid stone. It can hold water, it can lose strength, and when it gets wet enough, it can help a collapse turn into a fast-moving lahar. One of the most concerning places is an area called Sunset Amphitheater on the upper western side of the mountain. Studies have found a clay-rich zone. They're more than 500 meters thick. Think about that for a second. More than 1,600 feet of weakened, water-soaked material sitting high on the mountain, above valleys where people live, drive, work, and sleep. That is why this matters. The danger is not only on the surface. It is not just the snow, the ice, or the steep slopes. A part of the mountain itself has been weakened from the inside. From a distance, Rainier may look like stone, but inside, some of it is closer to wet clay than solid rock. And if that weakened section ever gives way, it may not fall like a normal landslide. It could turn into a wall of mud moving downhill before anyone has time to understand what just changed. About 500 years ago, Mount Rainier did it again. This time, it was the western side of the mountain. A huge section gave way and rushed down into the Puyallup River Valley. Today, that event is known as the electron mudflow. And it was not small. In some places, the mud was almost 100 feet deep. That is about the height of a 10-story building made of rock, clay, water, and broken trees. Try to picture that moving through a valley. Not slowly, not gently, fast enough and heavy enough to rip giant Douglas fir trees out of the ground, carry them for miles, and bury them under thick layers of volcanic mud. Those trees are still part of the story today. Scientists found them inside the old deposit. Some were preserved well enough that researchers could study their growth rings. By matching those rings with regional tree records, they were able to narrow down the timing. The electron mudflow killed those trees in the late summer of 1507. That detail matters because it turns this from a vague ancient disaster into something very real. This was not just a long time ago. This happened in a specific year, in a specific season, in a real valley that people live near today. And one modern town sits right on top of that history. Orting, Washington, is built on the deposit left behind by that mudflow. Its flat streets, its neighborhoods, its quiet daily life, all of it rests on hardened volcanic mud from a disaster most people never think about. That is what makes this so unsettling. The past is not gone there. It is under the roads, under the homes, under the places where people drive, shop, and raise families. But the size of the electron mudflow is not what worries scientists most. The deeper concern is how it may have started. Because unlike many volcanic disasters, this one does not appear to match a clear eruption. No obvious ash layer. No clear sign of major volcanic activity. No simple warning written in the geologic record. And that raises a much scarier possibility. Mount Rainier may have sent a massive lahar down the valley without erupting at all. The scariest part about the electron mudflow is not just that it happened. It is that scientists have not found clear evidence of a major eruption tied to it. No matching ash layer, no obvious sign of fresh magma, no clean volcanic signal that says, this is what triggered it. For a long time, that was hard to accept. Because when people think about a volcano disaster, they expect an eruption. They expect smoke, fire, a blast, something dramatic enough to warn everyone that the mountain has changed. But Mount Rainier may not work that way. The current idea is that the electron mudflow may have started when weakened, clay-rich rock high on the mountain gave way. That rock had already been changed by heat, gas, water, and acid deep inside the volcano. In other words, the mountain may have been unstable before anything dramatic happened. The trigger could have been a small steam explosion. It could have been pressure inside the hydrothermal system. It could have been an earthquake shaking material that was already weak. And that is what makes this so dangerous. If there is no major eruption, there may be no warning signs people know how to recognize. No dark plume rising above the summit. No glowing lava. No loud explosion. No obvious signal on the horizon telling families in the valley to leave right now. The first sign may not be the volcano waking up. The first sign may be the lahar itself, already moving downhill. And by then, the clock has already started. That is the part that stays with you. A quiet mountain can still be dangerous. A beautiful view can still hide a broken system. And a disaster does not always announce itself in a way people understand. Sometimes, it starts before anyone realizes they are already out of time. Mount Rainier does not sit in a quiet part of the world. It stands near the Cascadia subduction zone, one of the major earthquake zones of the Pacific Northwest. Deep beneath that region, the Juan de Fuca plate is slowly sliding under the North American plate. It does not move fast in a way people can feel every day. But over time, stress builds. And when that stress releases, the shaking can be enormous. That matters for Mount Rainier Because the mountain already has weak material inside it. Some of its rock has been changed into soft, clay-rich material. Some of it is wet. Some of it sits high on steep slopes, above valleys that lead straight toward communities below. So the fear is simple. A strong earthquake does not have to come from the volcano itself. It does not have to mean magma is rising. It does not have to come with lava, ash, or fire. It only has to shake the right part of the mountain hard enough. And if that weakened section loses balance, it could collapse. Once clay, rock, ice, and water mix together, the slide could turn into a lahar and start racing down the valley. That is what makes this risk so uncomfortable. People often think of volcanic danger and earthquake danger as two separate things. But at Mount Rainier, they can connect. An earthquake could be the trigger. The weakened mountain could be the fuel. The valleys could become the path. And because this kind of clay-rich lahar does not always need an eruption, there may not be the kind of warning people expect from a volcano. No lava, no ash cloud, no dramatic blast. Just shaking, collapse, and then mud moving downhill. In plain terms, one strong enough jolt could disturb a part of the mountain that is already fragile. And when a mountain is already weakened, it may not take as much as people want to believe. There is a warning system for Mount Rainier lahars, and that matters. It was set up in 1998 to help protect the towns and valleys below the mountain. The system uses special sensors placed along the upper river valleys. These sensors listen for the vibration of a moving lahar, not the eruption, the movement. When a lahar starts rushing down a valley, it shakes the ground in a certain way. The sensors can pick that up. Then the alert goes to emergency managers. After that, sirens can sound. Phone alerts can go out. People can be told to move to higher ground. So, yes, the system is important. It gives people a chance they would not have had in the past. But here is the part that makes this hard to accept. The system does not warn before the lahar begins. It only detects the disaster after it is already moving. That is a huge difference. It cannot stop the collapse. It cannot hold the mountain together. It cannot tell people days ahead of time that the slope is about to fail. It can only say, in effect, the mud is already coming. And once that happens, every minute matters. This does not mean the system is useless. Far from it. It may save lives. It may give families just enough time to run toward higher ground. It may be the reason some people survive. But it also shows the limit of technology. Sometimes, even the best system can only react. That is the uncomfortable truth with Mount Rainier. The warning network can hear the disaster, but it cannot prevent the disaster from starting. And for the people living in the valleys below, that means preparation has to happen before the sirens ever sound. The computer models gave a number that is hard to forget. 5 minutes. In some areas inside Mount Rainier National Park, that may be all the time people have after a lahar is detected. 5 minutes is not much. It is not enough time to pack a bag. It is not enough time to make a plan. It is not enough time to wonder which road to take. By the time the warning comes, the lahar is already moving. Outside the park boundary, some communities may have more time, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 30, maybe close to an hour, depending on the valley and how far they are from the mountain. But even that is not time to be confused. Because a lahar does not wait for people to understand it. It follows the valley. It follows the river channels. It takes the fastest path downhill. And once it is moving, the only thing that matters is whether people already know where to go. That is why evacuation routes matter. That is why drills matter. That is why people in these valleys cannot treat the sirens like some distant, unlikely thing. If the alarm sounds, that is not the moment to start thinking. That is the moment to move. Because 5 minutes is not really an evacuation window. It is barely a recognition window. It is the amount of time it takes for your brain to catch up with what is already happening outside. And that is what makes this so frightening. People like to believe they will know what to do in an emergency. But in real life, panic steals time. Confusion steals time. Looking for your keys, calling someone, checking the window, waiting to be sure, all of that steals time. And with a lahar, time may be the one thing people do not have. So the lesson is simple but serious. The plan has to exist before the warning. The route has to be known before the siren. Because when the mountain finally moves, 5 minutes is not a chance. 5 minutes is the thin line between realizing what is happening and being caught by it. This is where the story stops feeling like ancient history, because people live in these valleys now. According to the official hazard zones, about 80,000 people live in areas that could be threatened by a Mount Rainier lahar. That number alone is serious enough. But Pierce County has looked at the wider impact of a much larger event, something closer to the scale of the old Osceola mudflow. In that broader view, the affected region could involve around 2.5 million people. That is not just a few cabins near a mountain. That is homes, schools, roads, bridges, businesses, power lines, neighborhoods. Entire communities built across ground that has carried volcanic mud before. To be fair, some places have taken this seriously. Pierce County has warning sirens. It has evacuation routes. It runs drills. People in certain communities are taught where to go and how fast they need to move if the sirens sound. That matters. It shows real effort. But then there is the uncomfortable part. King County, which is more populated, also lies in the path of a large Osceola-scale lahar, according to the video. The old deposit reached into places like Kent. The path is part of the same geologic story. And yet, the video points out that King County does not have zoning restrictions for volcanic hazard in the same way. That raises a hard question. How can two places face the same kind of danger and make such different decisions? A county line may matter to planners. It may matter to permits, maps, and local rules, but it does not matter to mud. A lahar will not stop because it crosses from one jurisdiction into another. It will not slow down because one side of a boundary prepared differently than the other. It will follow gravity, river valleys, and the shape of the land. That is what makes this so frustrating. The geology is already known. The old deposits are already mapped. The warning systems exist. The history is sitting right under modern streets. So, if the mountain moves again, the question will not only be about nature, it will also be about what people chose to do after they already knew the risk. Because if geology does not care about county lines, why do humans act like a line on a map can hold back a wall of volcanic mud? Mount Rainier is changing in a way people can actually see. According to the video, the mountain has lost about 39 fun-trum of its glacier area over the last 120 years. That is not a small change. That is a huge part of the ice disappearing from a mountain where ice is one of the key pieces of the danger. And when the ice pulls back, it does more than change the view. It exposes what was underneath. Weak rock, clay-rich material, slopes that used to be covered and held in place by snow and ice. In a way, the glaciers acted like a blanket over the mountain. They did not make the danger go away, but they helped cover and hold parts of the system together. As that blanket shrinks, more of the weakened mountain is left open to the air. That matters because exposed rock absorbs more heat than bright snow and ice. The darker the mountain gets, the more sunlight it takes in. More heat can lead to more melting, and more melting can expose even more rock. It becomes a loop. Then add rain, add snow loading, add freezing and thawing, season after season. Water gets into cracks. It freezes. It expands. It melts again. Little by little, the material weakens. None of this looks like a disaster while it is happening. There is no explosion, no siren. No dramatic moment on the evening news. Just ice pulling back, rock showing through, water moving through weak material. A mountain, slowly losing some of the restraint it once had. That is what makes this kind of change so easy to ignore. It happens slowly enough that people get used to it. But slow does not mean harmless. Sometimes the most dangerous changes are the quiet ones. The ones that do not scare people right away, but still move the system closer to the edge. Mount Rainier has done this before. It has sent massive lahars down its valleys. It has buried forests. It has reshaped the land. And today, the evidence is still there, sitting under modern roads, homes, towns, and cities. That is the part people forget. On a clear day, Mount Rainier looks peaceful. It looks almost unreal. Snow on the peak, blue sky behind it. A beautiful mountain watching over western Washington. But geology does not care how peaceful something looks. The old mud is still beneath the cities. The weakened rock is still inside the mountain. The glaciers are still melting. The valleys are still open. The sensors are still listening. And the danger is not really about lava. Mount Rainier does not need rivers of fire to become deadly. It does not even need a major eruption. If the wrong part of the mountain collapses at the wrong time, rock, clay, ice, and water could turn into a moving wall of mud before people fully understand what is happening. So the question is not whether this mountain is capable of doing it again. It already proved that. The real question is when. And when that morning comes, will people have enough warning? Will the sirens give them enough time? Will families already know the route to higher ground? Or will they lose precious minutes trying to figure out what the alarm means? That is what makes this story so haunting. Mount Rainier is not just a beautiful volcano in the distance. It is a reminder that some disasters do not disappear just because enough time has passed. They wait under the surface. They wait in the landscape. They wait in places people have learned to call home. And one day, if the mountain moves again, the most important question may not be whether anyone saw the danger coming. It may be whether they were paying attention in time. If stories like this interest you, the hidden disasters buried under ordinary places, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below. What do you think is the scariest part of Mount Rainier? The lava people imagine, the earthquake that could shake it loose, or the wall of mud that may come with almost no warning?